So, welcome back, everyone, to our next episode of Infrastructure Insights. And I'm delighted to say our next guest is Liz Baldwin. Rather than me do a kind of long introduction to our esteemed guest, it's Liz. It's great to have you with us. And would you be able to give our listeners a quick introduction to you and the Southern Renewals Enterprise?
No, absolutely, Simon, and thank you so much for having me. So I'm Liz Baldwin. I am the Southern Integrated Delivery Director as part of the Southern Renewals Enterprise. I've been in post since February last year, so getting on for 18 months now. So I can no longer call it my new role, which has been for quite some time. I am a civil engineer by background and have spent kind of over 25 years kind of working in the transport sector. And particularly in rail, I am really passionate about collaboration. I was Alliance Director of Essex Capacity Alliance, and actually one of the reasons why I wanted to take this role was that having seen firsthand what working in a much more collaborative, purposeful, collaborative
Hmm.
environment, the benefits that can bring, and it's just a really nice place to work, even when things are challenging. So that's what really attracted me to the role. And, I do ultimately love the railway as well. So it's been really nice to kind of be back in probably delivering direct in rail. So what is the Southern Renewals Enterprise? So the Southern Renewals Enterprise is an enterprise based on the Project 13 principles.
Hmm.
Anybody can Google it, and it's ultimately made up of 5 pillars. And the Southern Renewals Enterprise consists of 3 kind of main component parts, I suppose, in simple terms. One is the Southern Integrated Delivery team, which is the team I lead. And we are nearly all of us are full-time working on the Alliance, delivering the renewals portfolio. And for CP7, it's about £3.3 billion split across the disciplines. There are 5 partners within the SID. Volker Fitzpatrick, who lead the buildings and civils portfolio. We have Volker Rail, who lead the track portfolio. Atkins Realis lead the signalling portfolio. Octavius lead the EMP portfolio. And then we have Works Delivery, who are the network rail partner, who do they do multidisciplinary work, but they tend to be high volume, low complexity types of work, which is different to what the other partners deliver, which is why they're split on the single disciplines. And the portfolio is split about a third building and civils with Volker Fitzpatrick, about a third with Works Delivery, so the high volume, low complexity work. And then the other third is made up of the other disciplines, with track probably being the bigger portion of that third. So it just puts into context kind of where that £3.3 billion sort of is distributed. The other key part of a Southern Renewals Enterprise is the capable owner, and the capable owner actually is one of the 5 pillars of Project 13. So the
Hmm.
capable owner is in essence the client, and my opposite number is a gentleman called Mark Killick, who's the Director of Engineering and Asset Management within the region. And the capable owner own the asset. They give us the outcome sort of specification as to what needs to be done on the asset, and then they take that asset back into service. We hand that asset back to them once we've undertaken the renewals work that we need to. They're also the liaison out to the routes, for example, and to a lot of our other key stakeholders. But not to lose sight of the third really key component of the enterprise is the ecosystem, which is the supply chain. And we call it the ecosystem because it's about getting closer to those strategic suppliers who have a huge part to play in our success. And to put things in context, about half of the 3.3 billion will be delivered via the ecosystem in some form. And that
Right.
could be to tactical suppliers where we're delivering just widgets, so just buying materials, all the way up to our strategic suppliers where we would want to be backing on our kind of outcomes. We're letting contracts for the full 2 control periods with our ecosystem so that they can benefit from that sort of confidence in work and knowing what the work bank's going to be, but also work with us to make sure we achieve our outcomes. We have 5 outcomes that we're here to deliver. The first and foremost is affordable and profitable. So we need to make sure that we deliver the enterprise, deliver the renewals, within the £3.3 billion envelope, 10% efficient. It's worth
Mhm.
noting that's across the portfolio. So we are in a space where some disciplines may be slightly less efficient than others, but as long as we deliver efficiencies of a minimum of 10% across the portfolio, then that's successful. We then have 4 other outcomes, which is happy customer. safe, fit and healthy, positive legacy, and cleaner and greener. And they kind of do what they say on the tin. And we have just a handful of KPIs actually that allow us to monitor and track how we're delivering against those. And they likewise modify profit for the partners, dependent on how well we deliver.
Fantastic. Well, look, Liz, thank you very much for setting the scene there. And it sounds like you've got some kind of clear strategic objectives in place and then KPIs around that to be able to sort of monitor those over the next few years. As you mentioned, this is the first time Project 13 principles have been used on a rail project on this scale, shall we say. Now that you're in a year into this control period 7, what's your honest take on how it's going so far?
So it's really interesting. So the first thing I think is worth pointing out is I think there was a belief when the enterprise was being set up that almost on day one you're at that high performing enterprise level. But the reality is it is a journey. And certainly in talking to other organizations, water sector, for example, that are looking at establishing their enterprise, is a recognition that it takes time to both grow the culture, find your ways of working, and really establish those 5 pillars that are important. So when I took over, I set a 3-year plan for the enterprise. Year 1 was the year of collaboration, so we get used to working together, understanding each other's processes and procedures, what's working, what isn't working. Year 2 is absolutely the year of I call it jokingly with the team the year of integration, not the year of the snake. Because I do feel that we've really got to then leverage that opportunity to integrate, whether that's functions, so things that we do separately, we can bring together and do them centrally, but it's actually integrating between partners, sharing resources, delivering multidisciplinary work in the same access that we have. So really integrating at every level, kind of how we're operating. And I think this year particularly will be key to whether we have turned the tanker, in a different direction to really start to achieve those efficiencies that we need towards the end of the control period. I think year 1's been really successful. We've definitely done better and got off to a better start than has been seen at the start of any other previous control period. But I see year 2 as being really key to really seeing whether we've changed the dial enough to make sure that we are kind of set on that new trajectory. Things at the moment are looking positive. But I use a word with renewals is it's quite relentless, which is why it's interesting seeing the enterprise model applied to it. But what gets me out of bed in the morning is still the possibility of all of these things that we can achieve. There is so much that we have done and so much more that we can be doing in this next few years. If we are successful in year 2 and we've integrated, then I think in year 3 we start to see that proper transformation in towards a full operating enterprise model. Within years 4 and 5 of the control period, I feel we're then really into that high performing enterprise space, focused on CPA, what we're doing next, how can we take it to the next level. But I feel that we're on target for that at the moment.
And just coming back to that word kind of relentless there that you mentioned, I think that's really interesting in terms of how does that fit with, well, if we just take a step back, so this is the first time these 5 partners have come together with a 10-year delivery window. What kind of long-term outcomes are you hoping the enterprise will have if we look past that 3 to sort of 5-year period which you've explained there? And again, how does that rub up against this kind of your experience of these types of renewal situations and the word relentless?
So it's interesting. So firstly, I think it's worth talking about kind of what our aspirations are for the end of CP8, because that's ultimately where we will be at the end of the 10 years. So I think it's more than just achieving our outcomes. It's actually about kind of exceeding expectation in that space. This is the first time that a renewals portfolio has not just been about the relentlessness of renewals. We get with it some of those benefits of major projects where we can focus on the well-being of our workforce and our ecosystem. We can focus on biodiversity net gain. We can focus on making sure that the renewals that we deliver are sustainable and that we're lowering our carbon footprint, that we can leave a legacy. So we're just in the process, for example, of setting up a Southern Renewals Enterprise Apprenticeship. And one of the things we talk about, and we shared at the launch actually, was we call it Ava's story, but actually Ava does some work experience with us in year 1 of the formation of the SRE. at 16 and goes on to do her A-levels and continues to work with us through the summer. She then joins us at 18 to do a graduate apprenticeship. We then take her through a graduate apprenticeship. And actually, by the time the Renewals Enterprise is finished at the end of CP8, we have Ava and lots of other Avas who have been through an apprenticeship scheme with us, have worked across all 5 of the partners, and are now chartered civil engineers, chartered mechanical engineers, working as part of the enterprise, delivering renewals. So that's one of the outcomes that is really important to us, is to leave that legacy. So to make sure that we are growing the skilled people that we need tomorrow to work as part of us, and being able to work across partners is incredibly powerful. The fact that we can move people between partners to gain a real breadth of experience in delivering renewals on the railway. But actually, fundamentally for me, it good would look like everyone else has adopted the model. So we are the only region at the moment that has an enterprise model to deliver renewals. I think if we've done our job well, everybody else will also have an enterprise model to deliver their renewals, because they'll see how successful it has been. And ultimately, that Network Rail, or GBR as it will be hopefully, decide to keep the Southern Renewals Enterprise going past the end of CP8 because it's been so successful. So for me, it's about delivering on our promises, exceeding those expectations, leaving a legacy, and doing all of those other things that are really important to people who work with us day to day. And that touches on the renewals bit. Actually, I don't think I would have been interested in working in renewals in CP6 because it's relentless, but it's relentless almost with no more broader benefits. I think in the old world, what we bring is, yes, it's relentless, but that brings also huge opportunity because we can standardize things. There's a real construction to production way of delivering what we do, because we do the same activities week in, week out, day in, day out. We can start to look at actually what are the marginal gains, how do we improve that? But we're also having conversations about protecting our environment, making sure that we're not negatively impacting biodiversity. We've done our first carbon friendly track renewal, so we're using low carbon steel, blended ballast, low carbon sleepers. So the fact that we can then now make decisions to not just renew our railway to keep passengers moving, but do it in a more sustainable way, means a lot to the people who work within the region. So we're not just adding benefits to passengers, but we're actually improving the environment while we do it. So that's, I think, how we deal with the relentlessness. Is it's also really exciting and we would never have had the opportunity to do that if we hadn't come together as 5 partners under an enterprise agreement.
And that kind of story there you told about Ava, I think that links nicely to the kind of social value piece. You've outlined some sort of long-term sustainability, goals and aims and leaving a legacy. But I think for people kind of listening to this, hoping to take away learnings for potential future new alliances across various areas of infrastructure, I think that's a really nice example of that. I mean, we've talked a bit about the benefits of the model, Liz, and again, just sort of in keeping in that theme for people hopefully taking away some learnings, what do you see as the sort of risks ahead? Now you're sort of year into this year, if we're looking over the next few years and longer term horizons, but also how are you thinking about managing those risks?
So there's 2 key risks actually that I see at the moment, and that probably linked to the fact that this year is the year of integration. So the first key risk is that we need to still keep moving with that cultural and behavioural change. The reality is we've brought 5 organisations together who have their own personalities and cultures, and we are asking people, not just in the 5 partner organisations, but within the capable owner, to do things in a very different way. And likewise, I see that as being on a journey. So I also do see this year, in year 2, as being really key to whether we are starting to really see that cultural change and that behavioural change embedded in how we're behaving and how we're doing things. So I think see that as a huge risk, because if we can't embed that, we will never change fundamentally the ways of working. And I mean, how we behave with each other. So removing those traditional client contractor relationships, an enterprise has business to business relationships, but we're changing fundamentally how people would have done things in previous control periods. So, we are, in essence, we've been handed the keys to someone's house. We need to treat that with respect and make sure that we're delivering in the right way. But it is a very different way of doing things than would have been done in the past, particularly looking at it as a portfolio. So the example I've used is we could be, delivering track less efficiently, for example, but because we're really efficient in the buildings and civils portfolio, it means across the portfolio we can still deliver the volumes that we need to make sure that the network is operating in its most effective way. That's very different to how that would have been done in the past. So that's my first risk, is getting that cultural change. But it's also getting out to the roots, because we're doing things differently, and we're trying to juggle the move towards Great British Railways.
Yeah.
So Southern as a region are moving to the Southern kind of railway system, where we've got two alliances now within the region. You've got the Southern Renewals enterprise. So we also need to make sure that we are driving that cultural change and collaboration across these new organisations that are forming. So I think this year is really important. The second thing is, which is interestingly linked to the first, because the experience has taught me in the last 18 months, is that if you can demonstrate with hard data that you are delivering what you said, then people are much more likely to go on the journey of the cultural change. I think if you can't demonstrate that you're being successful, or there's any ambiguity about it, it makes that journey a little bit harder, because I think it's just a confidence thing. We have really underestimated how hard it is to bring 5 organizations' data together to be able to then measure it and report against it in an effective and efficient way. So that is what I would see as a second risk, is this kind of use of data to make sure that we can really both use it to make informed decisions, but also to demonstrate how we're delivering. And the reason why it's difficult is that renewals are thousands and thousands of things. So we're trying to measure 5 partners delivering thousands and thousands of things through their cost systems and everything else, which has always been a struggle in previous control periods, and I think is still something that we found a challenge in year 1. We have a system called the single source. When we used it in year 1, we've had to make some changes to it because of the level of complexity and the sheer size of what we're trying to monitor. But actually, we've just gone through user acceptance testing, and we're just rolling it back out again actually next week. So we should be in a really good space. But again, I feel that if we can't have confidence in the data we're reporting, and then also have access to the data to make data-led decisions, digital is a key part of Project 13. Then it will either erode confidence, and I think it will hamper us in our ability to make decisions. So those are the 2 kind of key risks.
Really interesting points there. And I like the phrase that you use around you've been handed the keys to someone's house. So you have to kind of treat this with respect. 5 partners coming together, getting used to new ways of working, and that piece around the measuring of data, being able to share that and use that to make informed decisions amongst the partnership. So I think that's really kind of useful stuff. Just because before we kind of move on to some other questions, is there anything else that you feel that I suppose we haven't covered in terms of how the enterprise works commercially, or any other kind of benefits or risks? Is there anything else there that you'd like to add?
Actually, there's just one point I think is worth noting, because I think this model is more closely aligned to what the outcomes that the client wants than I've ever seen before. And I suppose, so to put things in context, we kind of have thresholds within the commercial model. So the partners, no matter how efficiently we deliver, cannot make profit if they don't deliver a minimum level of volumes. So we have to deliver 92.5% of the volumes as a minimum. We could have been super efficient, but if we miss those volumes, then the partners get no profit, even if we've been really efficient. So the language I use to the roots and to the capable owner team is, actually, you should want the partners to be making money, because if they're making money, they're delivering the volumes. And there's then a second threshold. So we have to deliver 100% of the volumes, and an average of 100% across the kind of non-key volumes, as it's called, for the partners to even be entitled to more than 1 times profit. So that just drives the partners not just to be efficient, but also to deliver the volumes. And I think it's a really, really well aligned model. So I think that for me is really powerful, because we have got to deliver what our client needs, which is the volumes, and we want to deliver them efficiently, because we just get to deliver more with more volumes, with the same money. And to put things in context, once we get past our kind of, if you like, we've delivered our work bank, for every pound above that we save, 85 pence of it gets reinvested back in the rail network. So this isn't like a traditional target price contract where you share any benefit 50-50, 85 pence in every pound. So if we saved £1 million, £850,000 goes back into doing more renewals. And that's how the model works. And I think it's really, really powerful to deliver ultimately the best outcome for our passengers, because we want our passengers to not even know that we've been there, not be disrupted by any quality issues that we might have. And that should encourage people to use the railway more often. There'll be more revenue. That means there'll be more investment in renewals. For me, it's a win-win for all of us. So I think it's really important that people understand that's how our model works. I think it encourages everybody within the Southern Renewals enterprise to do the right things, which is ultimately to deliver the volumes efficiently. The other 4 outcomes do have a further modifier in them. So there are KPIs that are weighted, but in simple terms, if we exceed expectation in our other 4 outcomes, then profits modified up to 1 times 1.2, and it's modified down to 0.8 if we're not delivering across some of those outcomes. So again, the rewarding delivering to the other outcomes, and interestingly, there's a really close link in those outcomes to affordable and profitable delivery, because actually often safe sites are always more profitable and more well delivered. The fact that we need to make sure we've planned in an effective, efficient way, that we're closing out our health and safety valves, all drive better delivery. So we get into a virtuous loop, I always feel, of really improving delivery, really getting on top of it. So I think that model is really, really powerful. And you talked on the social value aspect of it, which is in our positive legacy outcome. In year 1, we delivered the equivalent of over £100 million of social value, which is amazing. And whether that was money we raised for charity, volunteering days, all sorts of things that the team did, donating shoes, for example, to sell shoes. We've chosen 3 charities that we're sponsoring for this year. But being able to put back into the region in which most of us live and work in this region is incredibly powerful. And it's also been a great tool to help build that culture, because we're bringing people together under causes that they would feel really passionately about, which is amazing. So that's probably the only thing I just wanted to finish with is I think we have a model that just really aligns delivering the very best outcome for the region.
Fantastic, Liz. Well, look, you've done an amazing job of just bringing it to life for everyone. So I really appreciate that. If we just sort of fast forward 12 months, in terms of kind of taking a bigger lens on the UK rail industry, what do you sort of think are going to be the big topics or pressure points in say 12 months time? I know that seems like quite a long time, and rail is in the news quite often, but really keen to get your take on that.
Yeah, so I think fast forwarding 12 months, it's really hard. It's easy, I think, in Southern for us to lose sight of it. But I think everyone's going to be focused on GBR and what that's bringing. So track and train coming closer together. And the reason why I think we're really interested in it in the region, but the reason why it's important to us is we already have 2 alliances now out of the 3 routes. Two of them are in alliances. So we have South Western Railways and South Eastern Railways. And although we're not in an alliance in Sussex yet, we're really close to GTR as a train operator. And actually, the region are establishing what we like to think of as a Southern railway system, where we're bringing all of those alliances together. So I think there's huge opportunity within the SRE, but also within the region to feed into what GBR looks like in the future, because we will have tested what works and what doesn't work. And what I'm particularly interested in is there's a sweet spot in efficiency of delivering renewals, for example, so we are pan region. So we are not a route-based renewals delivery. So we deliver renewals across all 3 of the routes. And I think there are some things that need to be regional and some things that need to be route-based. And I think as we move towards the GBR model, we will have been living firsthand in this next year, testing kind of what that looks like. So I think that's one of the big exciting changes that we'll see. I'm also really conscious that if we meet my aspiration of all of the other regions wanting to adopt the enterprise model, they need to decide that by the end of this year, because it takes time to then enter into that procurement and that engagement to move that model forward. So I also think, our successful delivery and us being able to articulate that this year is also really important. So what I want to see at the end of year 2 is that everybody else is starting to look at the enterprise model and starting to move that more collaborative way of working forward.
Well, we'll be watching that very closely too. So it should be interesting times for sure. Just sort of coming towards the end list, but what's the best piece of career advice you've ever been given? Or equally, what's a piece of advice that you found yourself giving to others?
So, gosh, this is always a really difficult question to answer. And more, I think, actually, as I've got older, and I probably didn't explain in my career journey. So I spent my first 16 years after I graduated university in the army, and largely being the only woman wherever I worked. So one of the things I never really benefited from while I was in the military was having a kind of female role model, because there were none more junior, more senior than me in the military.
Hmm.
So I think one thing I would say is my first boss when I left the military was a woman, and it's the first time in my career after 16 years I've had a female boss, and I learned a lot from her. One of the things that I really learned was about the importance of having female role models, and being able to see people like you in more senior positions. I think is really important, so that you have something to aspire to. But one of the things she really taught me was actually not to be afraid to ask for things, particularly around, I think, flexible working and making the work-life balance from a family meet. I've always worked full time. I've been really lucky to have a very supportive husband, who sometimes took up the slack. But what she actually taught me was not to be afraid to ask for what you want, and to have confidence in your own abilities. So I have always worked really hard, but I've also not been afraid to say, for example, I don't want to start work until after 9 o'clock because I'd like to drop my children at school. And I've definitely had a view that actually, if you're not prepared to do that, you're not an employer for me. So I
Hmm.
think that would be my piece of advice. And actually it would be to whether it would be to everyone, not, regardless of whether you're male or female, is, don't be afraid of asking for what you want, to make sure that you do get that work-life balance. And I can say that probably even more because Renewals is relentless.
Hmm.
There is no reason why everybody shouldn't be able to have a really lovely balanced work and life, in what they do. And that's, I think that would be my piece of advice is to actually don't be afraid to ask for what you want.
Fantastic, Liz. Well, look, we really appreciate your kind of thoughts and insights on everything today. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I'm sure we will speak to you soon. And thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, it's great, Simon. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.